Tonight we begin with the mid-year budget review, and I will be having this conversation shortly with Professor Gov't Bokpin, economist and professor of finance at the University of Ghana, Solomon Cudjoe, General Secretary of the Industrial Commercial Workers Union, Dr. Lord Mensah, who is Senior Lecturer at the Finance Department of the University of Ghana Business School, and James Cudjoe Aveji, who is Deputy Minority Leader in Parliament. But first, Ghanaians will enjoy another 3 months of free water and electricity supply as the government further reduces the burden of the COVID-19 pandemic on the citizenry. The Finance Minister, Ken Ofori-Atta, who announced this during this year's mid-year budget review, explained government puts the concerns and aspirations of the ordinary Ghanaian first.
We remember also well how the previous government, after imposing the inconvenient and income-sapping doomsday on households and businesses for 5 years, and insensitively increased electricity prices first by 89%, then by 10%, then by 78% and 20%, and finally by 59% between 2010 and 2015 alone. It took courage, Mr. Speaker, and care for President Akufo-Addo to do what no other government have been able to do before, which is a net reduction of electricity tariffs by 11% since 2017. Such is a higher level of care today, that today, nearly 4 years in office, electricity prices for Ghanaians, households and businesses all included, remain cheaper in both nominal and real terms than what they were before 2017. Mr. Speaker, the reason is simple. It is because we put the concerns and aspirations of the ordinary Ghanaian first. That is also why we further reduce electricity prices by half and completely provide portable water for free for everybody since March this year, and we will extend it for another 3 months. To break it down, Mr. Speaker, it takes a caring government of the people, and with that, I mean a government of all the people, to offer cost-free water to all across the country, representing all domestic and commercial customers in Ghana for 3 months. Mr. Speaker, it takes a caring government to be for the people and for business, large and small, to choose to subsidize electricity consumption by 50% to 4 million households and nearly 700,000 businesses at a cost of $1 billion in 3 months, and we will extend the coverage for lifeline customers for another 3 months.
The government will also, in the coming weeks, launch a 100 billion Ghana cedis economic recovery program aimed at restoring Ghana's economy from the effect of COVID-19. In its 2020 mid-year budget review presentation, Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta announced that the President and his team have done a lot of thinking since March and brainstormed over the crisis, focusing on using the challenges as an opportunity to transform the country's economy. He describes the move as an ambitious and unprecedented 3.5 years program called Ghana Coronavirus Alleviation Revitalization of Enterprises Support CARES.
Mr. Speaker, the virus has laid bare our vulnerabilities as a world, as nations, as households, and as individuals. As at yesterday, Wednesday, 22nd July 2020, 622,725 persons had sadly succumbed to this virus, and 50,240,290 had been infected across the world. Mr. Speaker, even before we fully grasp the impact of the COVID-19 outbreak, our immediate concerns were on protecting lives and preserving livelihoods of our people. The President moved swiftly with a 100 million preparedness plan, which was prescient and laid the foundation to implement measures to save lives and safeguard economic activities by improving citizens' access to essential public services and helping businesses weather the downturn. Mr. Speaker, the pandemic has also brought to the fore the structural gaps in our health delivery system. That is why, with urgency, we have already begun to mount an effective, coordinated, and sustainable long-term response to the health needs of the people. Under the Agenda 111, previously Agenda 88 initiative of His Excellency the President for hospitals, we will design, build, equip, and staff new hospitals in every district without one, and a new regional hospital in every region with none. This demonstrates government's commitment to protect the lives of Ghanaians. The President has declared that all the district hospitals will be designed and built by Ghanaians, built companies, and will lay the foundation for the launch of the nationwide housing program, God willing, in his second term.
Let's now get deeper into the Finance Minister's mid-year budget review. Joining me is Dr. Lord Mensah. He's an economist and also with the Finance Department of the University of Ghana Business School. Doc, I'm grateful for your time. Also on the other line is James Cudjoe, who is Deputy Minority Leader in Parliament. We'll also be joined by Professor Bockman, who is a finance analyst and professor in economics, and also by Solomon Kote, who's General Secretary of the ICU. Let me start with you, Dr. Lord Mensah. It looks like we'll be borrowing the more in the coming days as the Finance Minister hints. What's your projection?
Well, if you listen to my communication this morning with your studio, I indicated that, times like this, government will definitely borrow. But as to where to borrow, that's where the question is. And I believe that the borrowing will come from the local, market. Now, the local market avails itself opportunities to borrow. Because at this time, before the COVID and even within the COVID, treasury bill rate is down. And comparatively, looking at the business confidence, which is also down, everyone that has, funds would like to invest. So I see it to be an opportunity for the government to borrow from the local environment. And then also looking at the Bank of Ghana the government issuance of bonds that the Bank of Ghana can tap into. These are ways that I think we can grow our economy by looking inwardly. Now, external borrowing, I don't foresee that. Mainly what we're going to get is going to be grants and all those. I am a bit surprised with the budget. If I am to look into the budget, I would have wished that, the finance minister would treat COVID as a standalone, for which, we will look at the inflows that COVID comes with, and then possibly the outflows that goes with it. If you look at the total expenditure and the revisions that the finance minister has done, clearly the expenditure side has been padded with COVID-related expenditure. And in fact, if you look at the revisions, that is what is shooting up the expenditure to 97 billion and over. And I asked myself and related to, the bridge financing that the finance minister went to request from the parliament last time. I can't really get the head and tail of it. So my wish would have been that, the finance minister would have treated the COVID as a standalone kind of project for which we'll see the inflows that COVID comes with. After we've received some grant, we've received some philanthropical funding, which the revenue side failed to, highlight on. And so for me, for that side, I see the numbers being jumbled together to dazzle myself as I sit here. And so if the finance minister can come again by giving us the inflows that COVID came with, because we already had our budget line, which obviously we would have gone for a review anyway, because as a country, we've never met our revenue target since, an eye-opener. So for me, I believe that with the presentation now did not really, do well on the side of COVID, because, COVID is a different line of, kind of event that has come to derail what existed already. And so I was expecting that we would have, had, a kind of COVID-related budget separately from our main budget streamline. Because if you look at the revisions, the finance minister never touched on the capital expenditure. Capital expenditure was not touched. If you look at compensation, it was raised a bit up. If you look at grant and other government, expenditure, it was, to other government, it was revised down. And that is where I always have problems. But then let's look at other expenditure. That is where I have problems. Other expenditure, looking at COVID-related and ESLA. And in the COVID-related alone, we had over 11 billion. So I asked myself, the projection that the finance minister did in the bridge financing that he requested from the parliament, he made projection of about, 5-point-something billion, in excess just to cater for COVID. So why is it that the second half alone, we had to spend about 11 billion just for, COVID-related activities? That is where I have a problem. And you could see that the revenue side is more silent on COVID-related activities. COVID is bringing in something. After all, we are not printing papers anymore as far as administration is concerned. Government, officials are not traveling as expected, they used to be. So all these things are inflows that we expect that the finance minister would have accounted for it before he would ask for that 11 billion, and over for the second, half of the year. So I see the whole budget as numbers put together to just, dazzle people like myself as I sit here, that I can't see the head and tail.
Let me bring in James Cudjoe, who is the deputy minority leader in Parliament. Doc, the minister explained to you that the over 11 billion cedis he is demanding for is for tackling the coronavirus pandemic. He announced some freebies, including additional electricity for Lifeline customers and water for all Ghanaians, and what have you. He also said that we'll be borrowing more, he admits, but that is as a result of the coronavirus pandemic and all of that. That makes sense, isn't it?
Good evening to your listeners. Aisha, let me begin by giving some basic information before I try to explain or answer your question. If you see clearly where we stand today, or by June of this year, in terms of our fiscal performance, it is clear that government has not performed well. The revenue target for the whole year, it's about 68 billion in the budget, which was approved in December last year. Now, because of the COVID, according to the minister, the expected revenue now by the end of 2020 will no more be the target of 68 billion. It has dropped from 68 billion by a whopping 19.8 or 20%, which is 13.4 billion in number terms, to a 53.7 billion Ghana cedis. Now, whilst revenue is dropping by 20%, expenditure is increasing, or expenditure will be increased to 97.7 billion Ghana cedis. Now, this is giving us a gap of about 44 billion Ghana cedis. This is where the question is. Now, if your revenue is only 53 billion, or let's say 54, and your expenditure is going to be 97 or 98 billion, the difference of 44, how are you going to finance it? Now, as Dr. Lord Mensah has said, we need to show clearly what is the position of COVID, what is COVID bringing to us as a country. So far, as you can see in the budget, the minister actually indicated that there has been a rapid credit facility of $1 billion, which translated to about 5.85 billion Ghana cedis. Government received that money as a result of the COVID. Now, government also received about 2.03 billion Ghana cedis from the World Bank. And then we also received from Bank of Ghana, which is borrowing, which was approved by Parliament, about 10 billion from Bank of Ghana because of COVID to government. Now, we also took some money from the Stabilization Fund, about $200 million. And if you convert, it's about 1.2 billion Ghana cedis. That is also taken from the Stabilization Fund to the Contingency Fund, then allow the minister to use for COVID-related issues. Now, so you see clearly that the expected GDP growth of 6.8% of GDP, which the minister has targeted for 2020, has been revised downwards to 0.9% as a result of COVID. But data from previous year, from 2017 up to date, and which IMF Article 4 reports, and then also the COVID-19 report, indicate that the issue of blaming COVID-19 all the time as a result of the poor performance fiscally by this government should not be the case, because we have had issues that clearly show that COVID-19, even though has effect on the performance of the economy, that cannot always be the only solution. So when government is announcing these reliefs to the people, that is good news, because the COVID has affected a lot of businesses. And if you see the disbursement of the funds, the COVID-19 funds in the budget, you see clearly that a lot of people who need the money are not receiving the money, yet the balance is standing in the book of government. Why is the minister waiting for all this money standing in the book of government, where businesses need to be supported, and then small enterprises need assistance? They are not getting it, and money is sitting down. What is the minister going to do in order to ensure that these businesses receive the money as early as possible, so that it can cushion them in order to make profits, for government to tax that profit and make income?
That is for Parliament to question the finance minister on that. But let me bring back.
We'll question the finance minister.
Let me bring back Dr. Lord. Let me bring back Dr. Lord Mensah on this. The impact of COVID is dire. And plus, we're also entering into an election year. The minister says he seeks to revive the economy with some 100 billion cedis package. What's the reality, knowing very well also that in an election year, the economy, the spending of government balloons?
Well, the minister is very aware of the spending. That is why in the budget, he requested for a scrap of those fiscal, responsibility act and, things that governs the control of our budget deficit, raising the budget deficit to about, I think 11 point something or so, from all the way target of 4.5 to 11 point something. And this gives you the signal that the minister is ready or to go all out to spend in the devoid of the election year. And so for me, I'm not surprised, because the aggressive posture of the government is still clear on the ground. The government doesn't want to renege on the optimistic budget that was, presented in 2018. So if you look at the presentation clearly, it gives you the signal that the minister is just adding on the COVID expenditure, to the existing expenditure. And that is what is creating that huge, expenditure of 90-something, billion, 97 billion. Now, if you take a country and you really want to manage in the era of, COVID, I believe that you definitely have to be conserved a bit. Because if you take, a country where your revenue has been revised down, and then you widen your expenditure, it seems to be an aggressive, nature of looking at the future. And for me, if you manage in a manner of expanding your expenditure while your revenue is coming down, you might always face problems. And I think the minister knows the consequence. That is why he's calling for a review of the Fiscal Responsibility Act, so that they can go all out to make room for this expenditure that is outstanding.
Stay on for me, and because we're now going to talk about unemployment, because the finance minister has announced that the government will introduce a national unemployment scheme to pay temporary income to laid-off workers.
Mr. Speaker, government will inject liquidity into a system to ease cash flow difficulties of businesses and protect workers by honoring obligations to contractors and suppliers in a timely manner. Building on recent good experience of sourcing from the pharmaceutical and textile and garment sectors, government will expand procurement from local producers for its goods and services. Mr. Speaker, we are mindful of the fact that some businesses may have to shed some labor in order to survive. In the unlikely event that this happens, government through the Ministry of Employment and Labor Relations is collaborating with social partners, labor and employers to establish a national unemployment insurance scheme. The scheme will provide temporary income support to workers that are laid off, and also provide them access to retraining to help them take advantage of employment opportunities in new fields.
Dr. Lord Mensah, what do you make of the packages announced, especially with the establishment of the insurance package, insurance scheme for employment?
Well, I'm happy the minister realized that liquidity, provision for the system. This morning I emphasized on liquidity, but then the medium in providing that liquidity might be where I will have a problem. If provision of liquidity will be going through the corridors of the banks that we've cleaned and they are now stable, which they are able to intermediate and determine the various productive sectors of the economy, even in this COVID, I will be happy to see that. Not necessarily giving money to people, which those monies will end up in unproductive hands and all those. I will not be happy to see that. But then also, I'm also happy with the local procurement expansion, which for me, it will go all the way to build up our local industry. And that is the order of the day. As we speak now, it's a lesson that we've learned in this COVID. I mean, to ensure that we develop, our local capacity to make sure consumption is basically, locally based. But then also with the national, insurance scheme, that is where I have problem. Elsewhere, for me, I would have left this for the private sector instead of leaving it, for the government to take care of. Now, look at our, national health insurance. It will give you a benchmark to tell you that when we attempt anything of that sort, it might not necessarily, yield the necessary dividend that is expected of these, insurance schemes. But then rather, if you go to the private sector, we have income insurance, which in a way, most of the agencies that employ can engage their employees to subscribe to such income, if the package is available anyway, to subscribe to such insurance, so that in times like this, that insurance comes to cushion, you throughout, the period that you find yourself unemployed. And then it falls back to line when things get better. So for me, I won't like the government to take up that national, how do they call it? National unemployment, insurance, but rather pass it on to the private sector. And I believe private sector with its own target for profit will ensure that the right thing is done.
A number of freebies announced by the finance minister, and it shows how much government is going to be spending in the coming days to fulfill all those promises. I'll be getting how, from James Cudjoe, how they intend to ask for accountability from the finance minister. But